I hope you had a good first day in world history, and if you didn't get enough of my melodious voice today, you're going to get more of it now. In class today, you know that you got your first reading assignment in your textbook, and you're going to find that just about every single day this quarter and next quarter in world history, you're going to get a reading assignment of a similar length and a similar style. At times, we'll certainly ask you to read some other types of documents, but consistently you are going to be reading from your textbook. So what we would like to do is give you some tips on how to do this really effectively because you're going to be doing a lot of it. So that's what this PowerPoint presentation is intended to do. So why should we talk about reading? Well, you're going to be using your textbook for 2 years, and you will have short reading assignments almost every day from it. So in 9th and 10th grade, we use the same textbook, and we do use it every day. So you are going to need to get to be good at this. And basically, we're asking you to be prepared to read purposefully and carefully. Sometimes I think you guys do readings, but you just sort of skim through it, call it good, and say, okay, you know, my teacher will explain everything I need to know tomorrow. Well, in this instance, we expect you to come to class knowing some things so that we can expand on that knowledge, so that we can use it for activities, so that we can use it as a base for even deeper understanding. So it's not enough to just sort of read it, do it, and not worry about what you've learned. You need to read and you need to learn. So what will you be reading? Well, you're reading your textbook called World History, Patterns of Interaction. And a typical reading assignment will be one section, which is really only 4 to 5 pages. So we're not asking you to read a lot, but we are asking you to read it carefully. And just about every day you will take a reading quiz. It is always on the section that you read for that night. So if you read Chapter 1, Section 1 on Monday night, on Tuesday in class, at the very beginning of class, you will take a short reading quiz on that chapter section. These quizzes are worth 5 points. There are 10 questions, each question worth half a point, the whole quiz being worth 5 points. They are a pretty significant chunk of your grade, so you do need to make sure that you're doing pretty well on them because it will help to keep your grade nice and high as you go into even more difficult assignments like unit tests, essay exams, paragraph writing assignments, all of those other things. So why should you be reading? It's a fair question. I'm sure you're saying, why do I need to read this 1,000-page boring book? Well, first of all, I don't think it's boring. But second of all, it will help you to develop a better understanding of world history. As I said before, the textbook is the basis for some of the things that we do. We certainly expand on it, but it will give you a basic understanding of what's gone on in world history. You will also better succeed in your reading quizzes. Whether you like it or not, Mr. Eugene Mismer assigned reading quizzes, and the only way to do well on them is to read. It's a very revolutionary idea. And you are preparing for class activities and discussions. So when we do debates, you can use the material from the textbook to help you. When we do role-playing activities, you can use the material from the textbook to help you. So it furthers what we're going to do in class. And finally, you're developing good study and life habits. MPA is a college preparatory school. You will be expected to know how to read when you go to college, and you'll be expected to know how to read and understand when you go to college. And this is a great way to practice those skills. So, we have some advice to you. Be purposeful, and specifically, you need to have a plan when you read. Just don't make it some sort of willy-nilly experience. And in particular, don't make it inconsistent. Try to do the same thing every night. Unless, of course, that isn't working, then make purposeful changes to what you're doing. But make sure that you have an approach to this that works well for you. And, as I just suggested, evaluate what you're doing. If you're getting 6s and 7s on the reading quizzes, you really want to be getting a higher score than that. So then something needs to change. And that's where you can think about the suggestions that I give to you, come to me for help, go to your peers for help, etc. So, I told you that you need to read with purpose. Remember, what you're doing is homework, and it matters. And one of the first things to do when you read with purpose is to create a positive reading environment. Specifically, don't overestimate your multitasking skills. Don't text and read. It's kind of like driving, but it's reading. Don't text and read. Don't email and read. Unless you're reading the online textbook, which I believe we have access to one this year, and I can tell you how to do that. Don't have your computer even open. Set it aside. Some people do like to take notes. If you want to take notes, then the only application that should be open on your computer is Microsoft Word or some sort of word processing program. but really try to focus on reading and reading alone. So, as I said before, you need to have a plan. So I'm going to talk to you about what you should do before you read, while you read, and after you read. And I should point out, these are not the only ways to do this, but we're trying to give you some of the ideas that we think are most successful. So, what should you do before you read? Consider using some pre-reading strategies. For example, take an advanced look at the section, flip through it, try to figure out where is the section going, what is it trying to do. The textbook does a very nice job of initially laying out the major questions it's trying to answer in each section, and then that gives you an idea of what you're reading for. Why does it matter? Preview the terms and introductory material. There's always bold-faced words through the chapter and sections. Take a look at those. Those are obviously the most important concepts you'll be learning about. And look over the unit study guide you're provided. We give out a nice detailed study guide, and it covers each chapter and section. So look at what we expect you to learn as you read. And then lastly, preview the questions at the end of the section. The textbook does a nice job of kind of giving you a little quiz at the end. Look at the quiz ahead of time so that you know what you're supposed to be learning. So, what should you do while you read? We always recommend that you actively read. Very few people can retain a lot of information from simply reading and doing nothing else. And that's why we say we want you to be active. We want you to do something while you read. Well, what is that? First of all, remember it's your book, so why not try highlighting or underlining? This is something that many ninth graders have never done before. They've never had this opportunity. We recommend trying it. Just don't do what I did in my 10th grade U.S. history class, which is underline or highlight the entire book. You need to be selective about what you highlight. Think about why you're reading, what the important ideas are in the chapter, and then highlight from there. Consider taking notes by hand or on computer. Some of the most successful world history students I have taught do take notes. And really, interestingly enough, many by hand. They say that they think it goes faster. They say that they think they retain more. It's really up to you, but it's something you might want to consider. And then check yourself for understanding as you read. When you are done with a paragraph or a section, kind of stop, pause for a moment, and ask yourself, do I understand what I just read, and do I understand why it's important? So this brings us to what or should you do after you read. So we're looking for ways to effectively retain and review the material. And one of the very first things you need to do is, did I understand what I read? Can you define the terms and answer the questions at the end of the section? Does the material in the unit study guide make sense? Do those terms make sense? Do the questions make sense? Can you talk about the material with somebody else? Can you call them and say, hey, did this make sense to you? What do you think about this? Even just being able to ask good, in-depth questions signifies that you understand what you've done. You also need to work to develop an effective review strategy. So first, you make sure that you understood the chapter. And if you didn't, my suggestion would be to go back and reread. If that still doesn't make sense, then you might want to jot down some questions and come in and talk with me the next day. But you also need to develop a way to review, because you are reading this to prepare for daily reading quizzes, or at least that's one reason. So some people do things like reread the section a second time. They might do that the next morning on their way to school. Some people say reviewing what you highlighted or your notes is effective. Again, so you've kind of narrowed the chapter down. Now focus on what you decided was important. Does it help to talk about the material? Can you talk with a parent? Can you plan to meet with a peer every day and just take 5-10 minutes and review what you've done? But again, these are not just sort of, I'm going to skim through things. It's, I'm going to do something active to try to remember the information. Finally, you need to evaluate what you are doing. Talk to others about what works and doesn't work. Talk to people about how long they're spending on their homework. Find out, are you above or below average? And if you're okay with where you're at, that's fine. But if you're not, come and talk to me, and we can talk about ways to change your study habits. Don't be afraid to experiment. If it's not working, don't keep doing it. It's obviously not the best way for you to learn the material. Come and get some ideas for what we can do to change your habits to be more effective. Consider consulting additional resources. Today, or depending on how far we got tomorrow, I had you download a couple of extra resources, one of which is just a very broad overview of world history. It gives little paragraphs on each thing. That might help you set the stage for your reading if you kind of feel lost once you get into the chapter. Consider taking a look at that. And most importantly, work to develop good reading habits now. If you wait until the middle of the quarter, it's going to be really hard because we're in, full history mode at that point in time, and it's hard to catch up. Additionally, if you wait until later in high school or college, I'm telling you, it only gets harder to develop these habits. So go through the work and the academic pain, I guess you could say, of developing good skills now. It's really going to pay off for you in the end. So hopefully these strategies will really make sense to you and that you can put them to use. But like I said, if you're struggling, one of the very first things you should do is come and see me. I will be happy to help you and happy to give you ideas. Otherwise, good luck with your first reading assignment. And then tomorrow we'll be sure to discuss this to see if you have any questions about it. Have a good night.